Yes, guys, how you doing? Welcome back to the Spurs Talk Show. I am Sean Butler. It's time for another cheeky little update for you. It's Saturday. It's the 12th of July. Not a huge amount going on today with regards incoming news. It's okay, isn't it? We've had a really crazy week. Bit of a belter, if I'm entirely honest. Just a quick update in terms of Morgan Gibbs-White. Yes, Nottingham Forest are still all upset. Marinakis has embarrassed himself once again, but according to all reports, it's basically just a session of frustration being, I don't know, being inculcated by Marinakis into and around football. But in reality, I think he's just upset with his agents or his lawyers or whatever that allowed for, first and foremost, a cheeky contract clause to be put in there. At the end of the day, the reality is if the clause was inserted and everyone at Forest was happy with it, then it's been triggered. I don't really understand the problem either way. You got the money that you must have wanted. Otherwise, that clause shouldn't have been there in the first place. But either way, as far as it's all concerned, we are just, it's a waiting game to get through any of these kind of sort of tantrums and legal investigations. The lawyers are probably loving it, charging up hella billing hours. But in terms of that, that's the next time I think we can all rely on that one. So that one's done in all likelihood. Kudus is done. He's in. Nice little video seeing Kudus and Micky van der Ven having a little handshakey thing on the screen. A little bit awkward, a little bit weird, but quite nice at the same time. A little bit sweet, I guess. And now it turns, obviously, to outgoings, right? If we pivot now to the central midfield, the defensive side of the central midfield, and all the stories are out there that it's one of three at the moment. It's either Douglas Luiz, it's either João Palhinha, or maybe, just maybe, it is going to be something like an Adam Wharton bomber. Then that would be absolutely insane. It would be incredible. Obviously, we don't know how much money we're working with right now. The rumours are out there that £300 million sponsorship deal is being finalised or is finalised, but just not yet announced. Neom is apparently one such Saudi company, a real estate company. Riyadh Air is also spoken of. We spoke about this on Football Inc. earlier. There was a guy on Twitter who basically sort of did a bit of a deep dive into the reality that Riyadh Air were looking at a £50 to £60 million shirt sponsorship deal with Chelsea, which was deemed to be too expensive for them. And so they would probably like to do something similar to what they've done with Atletico Madrid and take on maybe a naming rights deal for the stadium, which could be anywhere between 25 to 30 million pound a season. And look, when you think of it like that, I don't want to be the guy who sort of like dampens anything here, but for what it's worth, when we were talking about a 300 million pound injection of capital, a 150 million pound injection from the owners, whether Saudi are coming in via the back door and getting on board with Tavistock or getting on board with ENIC so that they can maybe dance around any potential issues with conflicts of interest, given that PIF owns Newcastle United. Are they going to do something similar to how they've invested into Clearlake Capital, which is like a standard deviation away from Chelsea's direct ownership so they can get around those rules? Who knows whether they would go into ENIC or go into Tavistock, but could then go into ENIC? Not entirely sure. Neom, obviously, is a name that's been mentioned for their property side, which kind of makes sense, although who knows whether these stories are just kind of putting two and two together and making a logical story fit without any substance behind it. I don't know. Riyadh Air, 30 million, 25 to 30 million. What I would say, guys, just on that, right? A lot of people have always criticised Daniel Levy and Tottenham Hotspur for allowing 5 or 6 years to go past without any naming rights deals on the stadium. And now it looks like we're finally getting there. Now, those people who want to spin it into a way of saying, Charrington came in, Vinay's come in, the deals got done, whether it's with Saudi or someone else, black mark against Levy, green light, tick for the Vinay box, whatever. Who knows the truth? And I'm happy to, if the truth comes out, I'm happy to sort of work in that direction, whichever way the wind is blowing. However, what I would say is there is an argument. I've always said, right, there's an opportunity cost. There's a reason why a brand wants to have their name on a stadium. It's because it draws attention to their company and hopefully a byproduct, but maybe invisible or at least difficult to attribute ROI would come from people's recognition of the brand, and it just makes them have that kind of subconscious level of attraction to that brand if they see them in various commercial enterprise environments, right? But there's also the opportunity cost to Tottenham of handing that branding power over to those other companies. Obviously, they could have their own. And so there's certainly a lot of value, although, again, very difficult to attribute, very difficult to quantify or qualify. But for sure, it's real to some degree that you're going to have Tottenham Hotspur on the stadium for boxing events, for Beyonce concerts, for Formula One, for EA games, for the football games, NFL, whatever, rugby, all of those things. And so people are going to be attracted to the name Tottenham Hotspur when they see the stadium, and all those things might end up with one fan becoming who wouldn't otherwise be a Tottenham Hotspur fan, choosing Tottenham as their football club, for example. The challenge is, or not the challenge, the reality is that Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is no longer that brand new. It's 6 years old, and there's other stadiums that are popping up around Europe. Real Madrid has come more recently, and I think that has generally been given the best stadium in the world moniker. Barcelona's is coming very soon. Newcastle United's is going to be insane. Everton's is very nice. I'm not sure if it's at the same level of Tottenham Hotspur. But over time, the object that it's a shiny new toy from 2019 till 2024, 25, it starts to kind of lose its appeal. And it certainly doesn't have that brand effect, that same value, that same association to high quality when it's no longer going to be referred to as the best stadium in the country, the best stadium in Europe, yada, yada, yada. Over time, all that shimmers isn't gold. It ends up becoming a little bit less appealing or less new, right? And so everyone's on to the next thing. And so you could make the argument that Tottenham Hotspur played a blinder in as much of getting all of the value of the Tottenham Hotspur brand for the period of time where the stadium was at its most attractive. And now is the time, as other stadiums are starting to emerge, and that competitive threat, that competitive imbalance that Tottenham have had of being able to always basically attract the best events, the best performance artists, all those things to the stadium. Over time, those things are not necessarily going to be quite as attractive. I'm not saying they won't be attractive, just not quite as attractive, and there'll be competition for those sorts of events, those sorts of deals. And so you could make the argument that Tottenham Hotspur have got the most juice from the squeeze of the branding not being someone else's for the last 5 or 6 years, and now you're moving into a situation where you're getting your 25 to 30 million, which is what Daniel Levy was looking for and asking for forever. It may be, if the story pans out, that that's the case. You've got 25 to 30 million pounds now as that story changes shape, which is great. It's great. Now, again, you can still make the argument, well, that's 30 million quid or 150 million pound that we haven't had over the last 5 or 6 years. And that's true, and that's fair as well. And if Daniel Levy hadn't found a sponsor in 2019 that was willing to pay that amount of money, I'm sure he would have figured out in his own mind and with the minds of his experts around him, what is the value of the intangible of Tottenham Hotspur Stadium being everywhere? What's the value of it being called something else? How much did that look like? He thought it was 25 million. Until he found that number, he wasn't going to change. Maybe he's found it now. What I would say, guys, is that 25 million pounds today is probably not what it was 5 years ago. Certainly it wasn't what it was 10, 15 years ago. How much does it really get you? When you look at the transfer market, right? João Pedro, 50 million, 55 million, Mohamed Kudus, whatever. All these players are sort of 55 to 60 million, which are not the very, very highest quality. They're probably the sort of tier 2 players in football. To me, whilst the 300 million pound deal sounds amazing as a number, in reality, if it is 25 or 30 million pound a year, it's great. It's money we don't have and it helps. But that doesn't, when you think about how much money it costs to bring in a great player, it's not the game changer that it sounds like on paper. 300 million pound deal versus 30 million pound a year over 10 years, for example. It does pay for the interest on the stadium debt and the club's debt every year, which is great. It's one less thing to worry about. It's guaranteed revenue, and it makes us more attractive for future investments and all those sorts of things. I'm not poo-pooing it, but I just want to bring it into context that there is a major difference between a 300 million pound cash injection or a 300 million pound sponsorship deal that is spread over 10 years. And like I say, when you look at the value of a player that does improve you, but isn't a game changer or a world beater, and you only get one of his feet, a right foot for that price, then we have to sort of bake that into the context. Not trying to dampen any spirits, just trying to put it out there. For me, we still need, other investment. Hopefully that's true as well. At the same time, there's the sponsorship deal that's been percolating and also capital injection, whether it's Saudi Arabia or otherwise. Excuse me, stories out about Riyadh Air does make a little bit of sense if they're not going to pay the 60 million for a shirt sponsor and they want to just sort of dip their toe in the Premier League, but in the London market, then that would be a way to do it. We shall see and all that stuff. But obviously Tottenham still do need to improve, still do need to go and get a worldie coming in like an Adam Wharton, if we can in the 6th, would be absolutely sensational. Then if we can just go and get a left back, I'd be happy, but dream world scenario, you can go and get a striker as well. In terms of the 2 outgoing stories that I wanted to bring to your attention, there are only really 2, and they are important today. Bissouma, on the one hand, there's stories out saying that Fenerbahce officials have actually sent over their flown over in a jet to try to secure Yves Bissouma coming in to the football club. I would say that they did actually send a private jet into Brussels airport last night to pick up Archie Brown, who is a player that plays for Ghent, I believe. And he ended up, it was a very funny story. He was sat at the airport waiting for a flight with AC Milan. AC Milan had flown a jet in. They were going to go, he was going to fly there, but Fenerbahce also flew a jet in. And so he had the option of which private jet to jump on. And he has, in the end, decided to leave Ghent and go to Fenerbahce. Now, that doesn't cop block the Bissouma deal. And anyway, he's a left back. But if the stories are true that Fenerbahce officials were also flying to London to try to secure Yves Bissouma, then they'd have to have at least 2 jets, because one of them was in Brussels flying back Archie Brown to Turkey last night for him to sign. The other story that's out today is that Yves Bissouma is saying he doesn't want to leave, is that he wants to kick his heels in and basically say, I'm going to run down my contract, or I want to stay at Tottenham and fight for my place, which is another way of saying I'm not leaving because I know in 12 months' time I might be able to get myself a real juicy little contract of several £100,000 a week to go out to Saudi Arabia or maybe Turkey later, for example. But he knows that it's in his best interest to do it next year rather than now. And that obviously presents a problem for Tottenham. The same with Sonny. I'm not saying that Sonny's been asked to leave. I think we'd have a lot more respect for Sonny, and if he wants to stay. A lot of the reports are saying that we're leaving it up to him to decide his future, which again, as much as I love the fact that we're respecting the guy who's been so loyal to us, at the same time, I think that there is also, that's the tail wagging the dog a little bit with regards to decision making, and it doesn't come across as like as particularly sort of football first. It comes across as a nice gesture, but one that might end up coming back to hurt us. He didn't want to leave to go to Saudi. He didn't want to go to Turkey. He doesn't want to go to LAFC. He wants to stay and fight for his place. The only way that you can move players on, really, if they don't want to go, is you can't force them, but you can make it apparent to them that they are 4th or 5th or 6th choice. So, and say, look, you're not going to get the minutes. If you want to leave, then you can. If you want to stay, fine, but you're really not going to get any minutes here. So, and you might even get left out of a particular squad, given that we have struggles with our registration processes. So if Bissouma is digging his heels in and saying he's not leaving, then does that put paid to the idea that Tottenham Hotspur are not going to be able to get a 6? Or do you terminate the contract? I can't imagine we would do that. He's a valuable player. I still think you could get probably 15 million for him. He's not on a huge wage, but I don't know if you could loan him out somewhere. But again, if he doesn't want to leave the Premier League, he did actually, apparently, he hasn't said this, but according to the reports, he's saying he wants to stay at Tottenham or at least in the Premier League. And so maybe there's an opportunity, if there's truth to that story. And again, I don't know anything. I'm just telling you what's out there. But if there is truth to that story, then maybe the solution could be to go to Crystal Palace and say, hey, is there any chance we can do a story with, do a deal with Adam Wharton? And by the way, you can have a Bissouma, a Prem-proven, ready-made replacement for you to come in if that's what you wanted. Obviously, multiple player deals at the same time are very difficult, but we have done similar things with Leicester, with Maddison and Skip in the past, and I think we did one with, or was it with Harry Winks? We did another one as well. So I think that there's mechanisms here, but it certainly isn't a particularly perfect situation if you do have ambitions to move a player on so that you can make room. As I say, the other option would be just to bring in the guy that you want to bring in and then make it clear to the player that's sort of being stubborn, not really interested in you being here, mate, anymore. Thank you for your time, but look, you can see you're 5th or 6th in the pecking order. And for what it's worth, there's the other option here, which is Rodrigo Bentancur. He hasn't yet signed the new contract. I know most people want him to stay. I would take a decent bid for him if it means we can go on. I look at Morgan Gibbs-White. I see him probably better used as an 8 than he is as a 10, even though he plays as a 10 or a right wing for Forest. But I see him better in the 8. And so you either go to, just find out what's going on with Bentancur and why it is that he's not signing his contract, or you find out if there's an offer for him. And then maybe the alternative option, if you're trying to free up space, is Pape Sarr. Obviously, we're not going to get rid of Lucas Berghvall. And a lot of the other players that we're moving out can obviously fit into that situation, into those spots at times as well. But for me, a 6 is crucial. And Bissouma is the kind of block on that one for me. It's an interesting story. I'm not sure where it goes. Let me know your thoughts. How would you engineer the move? How would you make Bissouma recognise that in order for us to move forward, he needs to move on? And he doesn't have to do it, right? He's got it's his contract, it's his career. He doesn't have to go if he doesn't want to. But how do you engineer that situation where he thinks it's best for himself to leave. Are there any teams in the Premier League that you would think that would be a good fit for him that we could maybe have a conversation with? I think Crystal Palace wouldn't be a bad shout if Adam Wharton really was Tottenham's top choice and first choice destination, and if there was the money to actually go after it. The last story for you guys is Cristian Romero. According to reports today, he is being offered a new contract worth £40 million for a 4-year deal, £200,000 a week. Apparently he turned down, or he said he would reject, one that was offered a couple of days ago that was lighter than that. 200 grand a week would make him the club's highest earner. I said to you this all year, I've been saying to you, and please God, let it be true, that Tottenham will either have a new record signing or a club's highest earner. Even if that doesn't happen, I think the fact we've got two monster signings at 55 and 60, it was more around the point that I was making, that the idea that Matt Law was saying that there's no money available is nonsense, and that Tottenham would certainly have a busy summer with money to spend. And it looks like if we get Morgan Gibbs-White in and Kudus with all the others we've already done, we're up towards 150, 160 million already. So an interesting summer. But I do think that Cristian Romero will be offered a contract for 200 grand a week. If he signs it, I want to know your thoughts, guys, whether you think he's the right guy to have the captaincy role. I'm not sure that his behaviour and the way that he's worded things, the fact that he called out the medical staff by not calling them out, but by praising the team that fixed his injury, the fact that he said about the kind of the roadblocks or whatever it was that will always be here, that have been here and will always be here, about Ange Postecoglou on the day that Thomas Frank came in. Not a great way to kind of welcome your new boss in if you have intentions to be here. There's been a couple of things that he said as well, in interviews. I just don't necessarily think that, I think that he's a leader on the pitch when he's fit and when he's up for it. But in terms of a captain, I think you have to be more than that. I think you have to be all-encompassing, all-powerful, kind of the club. This is your club, and you have to kind of love it with all of your heart and act like a captain. And I'm not sure he has. At the same time, I find it problematic to find the alternative answer. I'm not sure where you go. I don't think that Sonny has been a fantastic captain. I love the guy, but if he does stay, I'm not sure that the captain's armband he's not the right profile. He's older in age, but I think he's quite young at heart. I'm not sure he's got that kind of tenacity, that bite in him to be able to kind of command things out of his teammates. So that's a little bit of an issue for me. I look around the other players, and I'm not really sure where I see the obvious answer. I wouldn't give it to Vicario. I think that Decky might be a good fit, potentially. I also think, though, if you're someone who's in their 20s and you're the captain of the football club, then you should be expecting to play all the time. And so with the amount of quality we've got in that kind of forward end of the pitch right now, I'm not sure if that's necessarily the right answer. I wouldn't give it to Maddison. Richalison, no. Solanke, no. Pedro Porro, as much as I love the guy, I think he does show leadership, to be honest, but I don't think he sort of commands the English language well enough to be able to handle, captain responsibilities, excuse me, in terms of the media. So it's a difficult one. But if he stays, let me know. Do you think he should be given the armband? In other news, just for what it's worth, it looks like Romano said that Atletico Madrid haven't come forward with the money, that Tottenham still want £68 million. They're miles away from that, and it's all gone very quiet over there. So he expects Romero to stay. I'm happy for him to stay. I'm happy for him to leave if the right money comes in and there's a good replacement. But if we can keep him and we can get a left back in, Anthony Robinson, and then a 6, I think we're cooking, especially if we could also throw in a cheeky little Johan Visser or something else. Depends how much money we have. And like I say, the first part of this show was just to say, like, if that 300 million that we're talking about here, if it's a 10-year, £30 million a year deal, whilst it's great, it doesn't move the needle like maybe we're thinking it does. And so I'd hope that there's something else going on that can supplement that, whether it's an ownership stake, whether it's intentions to put money in, whatever that looks like, and we'll chew it over whenever the news breaks on it. But I just think that if the story is more just around the stadium naming rights deal, it's not the massive be-all and end-all game changer that people might think it is. It's literally £30 million, which is, like I say, it's half of a Kudus, which is not chump change, and it pays for the interest on the stadium, but it isn't the needle mover that we were looking for. Let's hope that there's more than just that behind it, and Tottenham can really crack on. Let me know your thoughts, guys. Like, subscribe, and comment. And as always, bye-bye.